Okay, good morning. This week we are back on the farm. We're going to show you a little bit of what we've been doing out in the field with the flat lifting. Now, we've had a few questions after I mentioned it last time, so I thought we'd explain a little bit more about that, show a few other bits that we've got going on the farm. But before we start, if you haven't hit subscribe and rung that bell, please do so. Let's go and have a look. Okay, so a lot of trouble that we've got on most of the ground that we've got is it's not really been maintained for years, and then we've come along now and we're expecting quite a high yielding production from it. So we've started to take more care and look at different methods of how that we can improve the ground to get a better sort of production rate from it. Now, one of which is this flat lifting. Now, we've rented this off a friend of Mark's from down the road. And the process behind it, or the idea behind it, like I said in the earlier video, is to sort of cut into the grass, ripple the underneath, and almost give this drainage channel underneath. Now, there's a few different things. What we don't want to do is on the grass that we've already got, we don't want to disturb that too much, and we don't want to take it out of production as well. So this is why we have brought this machine in. So the idea behind it is this first disc here, basically that cuts a groove in the grass. So that just cuts a slot or a line in the turf effectively. And then followed by that is this, effectively, I suppose, a bit like a plough, but under the ground. So it goes under, it's in like a triangle shape like that. As that pulls through at about 8 inches below the surface, that creates this ripple effect and almost puts a groove under the ground. So that's where this then free draining channel is all the way down the length of each run. Then we want to put it back and not disturb the grass too much, so that's where this roller at the back then comes in to sort of put everything back down. So because we don't know yet whether we're going to be silaging this or not, it will need rolling, because if we are going to silage it, if that has brought any stones up to the surface, we don't want that causing problems at a later date, so hence why we'll have to roll it. At the same time, we have put a tiny bit of muck on this field at one point, so then we need to think about whether we're chain arrowing, which is what Ryan is doing over in the other fields at the minute, because in the other fields they're an older sort of meadow lay. This is more of a young lay, so this technically needs less work because it's a younger grass effectively. So where we've spread the muck on the other place, and if you see here now, this is what the chain arrowing does. So when we spread the muck, there will be odd clumps of muck like that haven't sort of rotted down and gone in, or the worms haven't had it. So what we don't want to do is we don't want that on the surface. We want to chain arrow, rip all the old dead grass out, and at the same time knock them lumps of muck around, disperse them over the top. That lets the air get into the grass and the roots and help everything grow. So that's one of the reasons why we'll do the chain arrowing. And then, like I say, we'll have to roll this field, I think, because if we do pull any stones up and we are going to silage this, what we don't want to be doing is, obviously when we're silaging it, we don't want the mower going over it and damaging some of the blades. So the idea being, like I say, because this ground has all been compacted over years with tractors, muck spreaders, cattle tromping it down, it's all become very capped. So that's where, when we're getting a downpour of rain, it's all sitting on the surface, and like you can see there in the background, nothing ever seems to get away. Now, I know that is a low spot and needs a drain putting through it, but at the same time, even now, after this 3 or 4 weeks of fantastic weather that we've been having, this is still quite a bit squidgy underfoot, because the water ultimately is holding and not been able to get away. So we've got to get rid of that. I'm hoping, and Mark has convinced me, that this is the way forward, and we've been lucky enough that a friend of his has got the machine. So we borrowed that, that's what we're doing now, and then after the fact, like I say, we'll probably roll it, chain arrow it, and then it's ready for either. We'll probably lightly graze it first before we chain arrow it, and then we're ready basically for this to go into the system. So this is the 15-acre field right by the side of the farm that we're doing now. We've already done, which you saw a little bit of in the last video, that 60-acre field that we're renting up the road. There is a reason we've been doing some more work on that than you would ordinarily do on a rented field. We'll come to in a later video. Let's go and have a look what Ryan's doing. So regarding the reason for the chain arrowing and why we do it, it's like I say, it's because of this here. Now, for the majority of the ground, where we've spread muck, effectively it's all actually rotted down and gone in for the most part, because the worms have come through, they've eaten the muck, obviously everything's gone through and gone into the soil. But then we do have these clumps like this here, so obviously when that's come off the back, it's sat there in one clump, there's no grass going through it. If I move that, there'll be no grass underneath it, just be dead. So the idea of the chain harrows is twofold. One, it's to knock about bits of muck like that and spread them out, open them up, let the air get to it, and then allow the worms to get into it and sort of disperse it into the soil. And secondly, in an older meadow sort of field like where Ryan is doing at the minute, the idea behind that is it rips out all of the old moss, dead grass, that sort of stuff, and allows the new stuff to come through. So that's why we do the chain harrowing. And then I know it sounds a bit daft because we're flat lifting, so we're lifting all that surface as to why we roll as well. But like I say, we don't want them stones, but at the same time, when we've been spreading muck in the wetter weather or in the darker months of the year, the tractors and trailers, because of the weight of them especially, they've left lines where obviously the tyres and the tracks have been. So we want to make sure that the field is as flat as possible for going round. And the other problem we've got is where the cows have been, because obviously wherever they've trodden the ground down, there's lots of little pockets, round pockets where the hooves have been, which are almost little pockets of water to gather. Now if we leave that till the summer months to roll it, we won't be able to really do it any good because the ground will be too hard to sort of level it all off again. So we've got to just pick the right time, and with the weather being with us at the minute, now is the time to do it. So that's it for field work. Let's go and have a look at the calves. Okay, on to cows and calving, and we've had a good week this week, but it hasn't been without its work because we've had 10 additional calves this week, but of the 10 we've had to pull 5 of them. When I say we, it's definitely the royal we, because I have not had my hand anywhere. It has been Mark and Ryan. Now, regarding pulling calves, a little bit of advice. I think we've all got pretty good of knowing what's calving, when it's due, not just from the dates and the paperwork, but from actually looking out on stuff. And you tend to listen to the people at the market, especially I do, because I have not been around this for a long period of time. So I'm looking out now for the pins dropping on the back end. I'm looking out for all these bits and bobs pre-calving. The bit that I struggle with the most though is when do you pull and when don't you pull? How long do you leave it before you pull? The vet says one thing, YouTube says another, Google says another, Mark says something slightly different. I'm very much guided by Mark because he's done it all his life and he's the one with the experience here on the farm that runs the place. But it is that nervous factor of, you know, and Mark is right really, you know, are you better pulling the calf and having a live calf than leaving it too long and not having a live calf, and then us being into that cost factor of having to buy something in again. So, but are we making hard work for ourselves because we're pulling so many? Now of the 5 that we pulled, there was probably 2 of them that were of a fair size. So that might be down to size, it might be down to diet. Can't say it's necessarily us because they're of the cows that we bought in, so we haven't had the cows while they've been pregnant for that period of time, so that can't be us with the diet that we're providing. One of which was a heifer, so maybe that was because it was a heifer, but the other 2 were cows and we've had to pull them. They were fair calves, but I would argue not big enough to perhaps warrant or need pulling. So how soon is too soon, and are we making hard work for ourselves? But apart from that, we've had a really good week because we've had 10 live calves, we've had no cesareans this week, so we've had a fairly cheap week in terms of vet's bill. We've been selling at the auction as well. We sent 4 in, 3 Angus and 1 Hereford, and they averaged I think 378 a kilo the other day in the fat ring. So that was a good turnout really for them 4. We are running low now on fat cattle, which is unfortunate because the prices are so good at the minute. I would have loved to have had a massive bank full of fat cattle ready to sell. But unfortunately that's not where we're at. We've got loads coming through, but they're a while off yet. So I'm hoping the market stays up and we'll make some money on them in the coming months. So that's it for On the Farm this week. If you like what you've seen, hit subscribe, ring the bell. I'm going to leave you with a little montage of some field work, some cows calving, and ultimately a lot of Mark getting 8 inches deep in everywhere and less where it matters. Montage, boom.